Welcome to In the Hot Seat with the Tenney Group. I'm Spencer Tenney. It's good to be with you. What should we expect around M&A in freight tech? I have some very interesting perspectives coming your way with our guest, Chris Torrance, Chief Strategy Officer of Optym. Chris, welcome to the Hot Seat.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Spencer. Good to see you as always.
All right. Before we heat things up, sir, why don't you just take 30 seconds and tell us a little bit about what you're doing over there at Optym?
Yeah, I mean, after 20, 25 years in the space and working at some pretty cool companies, I joined Optym within the last year, and we are by name focused on optimization across multi-modes from airlines, rail, mining, LTL, and more recently, and the big reason I was brought over was to kind of begin this endeavor into the bigger piece of pie, modally speaking, is known as truckload, right? So I lead strategy, a lot of the go-to-market, sales, marketing, wear a lot of hats. But again, very common in the startup world. I say startup, but Optym again has been around for over 20 years, but just again has had some incremental growth over that time, and we feel like our product and the company as a whole is ready to tackle the big trucking landscape.
I love it. All right. With that, let's jump right in, sir. So
Yeah,
you mentioned 20 years, and we're talking about freight tech today. So in
yeah.
technology in general, can you give me just a sense of how things have evolved over the last 20 years and the way that folks are leaning into technology?
Yeah, I mean it's interesting to see how, again, other industries, the adoption rates, the absorption rates, and some of the, just the overall the transformations that have unfolded since my career in this space. But it's all relevant. I think we'd all agree that the pace of how technology is advancing has increased. It's rapid, right? So again, earlier in my years, I was at the more the corporate world, and at the time, technology it's all relevant, right? So that was a period, my TMS days, if you will. There was a lot of basic functions and features in the TMS space to be particular. And I think the messaging at that time was kind of this one-stop shop, single pane of glass, one source of truth. And for buyers, I think that made sense because this messaging was, hey, you go into one platform, one login, right? Don't have to remember massive amounts of credentials and toggle. But at the end of the day, Spencer, I think that what was lacking was you were good at all, jack of all trades, but master of none mentality. And I think
Mhm.
with the TMS offerings and software across the board, right, it just the investments hadn't really been made. I think the industry at large was less attractive for the investment community, something you're probably very familiar with. But the good news is it's incrementally over the last 20 plus years has really started to evolve. And what I'm seeing, and I think we talked about this recently, right, is unlike the old days of the one-stop shop, when I talk to private equity, et cetera, creating portfolios, they're really looking at best in breed. So, for example, optimization, what we do at Optym has been around for a long time, not a new term, but to really, it's a hard enough problem that it needs to be solely focused on. And I think
Mhm.
that's going back, whether it's visibility, back office, there's so many other functions and features that today I believe it's more of a true ecosystem. So instead of the one-stop shop, you've got the numerous partners, best in breed at whatever their niche focus is. And I think that that's going to be a lot of the future is how do we take those and of course we have to integrate all that, which is
Yeah.
its own set of challenges. But I think that's the big one I think I see is just more and a lot more players, right? After the frenzy of the capital markets during COVID really put us on the map, supply chain, transportation, logistics, trucking. I've never seen that amount of buzz go into our industry and the flush of capital that along went with that, which enabled a lot of newcomers, new entrants, a lot of entrepreneurs that had been at previous companies decided, hey, I want to go take a leap of faith and build something cool that they really had been wanting to do for some time, but the technology just didn't allow that and the capital wasn't really there. So I would say
Mhm.
those are pretty big takeaways from what I've witnessed personally again in the last again 10, 15, 20 years.
No, I think that's a good backdrop for us. And so, to your point, just because you throw money at a problem doesn't mean that there's a solve
That's right.
with that activity. So for the benefit of our audience, let's maybe you can just tell us about a story. I want to kind of put um, just kind of lean in on the whole concept of optimization because you
Sure.
like you said, you have all of these advancements and options available through technology, yet it's very easy to underutilize the available technology or just to miss something along the way while trying to integrate all these things. So maybe give us an example of where uh, someone in this industry had a gap for which that you guys were able to help optimize. Like what was it? What, like, quantify it? Like what are we talking about here?
Yeah, I mean, for optimization in particular, I think what I've, and again, I don't want to go into the AI buzzword category, but I think we're entering a phase now where we've had tools, and again, I'll use TMS because that's just a pretty widely known term. But and it does serve a purpose, right? There is a lot of functionality, and it runs deeper than most people really give it credit for. I think what's different when you talk about optimization, really augmentation, automation is what
Mm,
the trend we're really seeing. So we've got companies now that have invested in a lot of legacy tools that have gotten the job done. But in an age where we're being tasked to do more with less, especially when market conditions aren't exactly favorable, a
indeed.
lot of organizations are asking the questions of what could we, with the advancement of technology, really automate? And a lot of that comes down to math. And so, as I often say, I'm a simple guy. I just say, I tell people, I know you can do long division, Spencer, but why would you? There's a little calculator machine that it's always correct. It's you're not going to outperform a calculator when it numerically, right? So a lot of the companies we go into now, say trucking companies, are looking to say, I want to keep the Spencers of the world, my rock stars, my planners, dispatchers, operators, but I also realize that there's a high amount of turnover in some of these roles, and there's a huge amount of time that's invested on the learning curve. And so, if you can just replace that or augment that with technology, with AI, with machines, it starts to again provide a lot of time that can be reallocated to focus on what I would say is more revenue generating. Go get more freight. For the dispatcher, go ask your drivers. Get to know them personally. How was your week? And we see 100% turnover, attrition in the trucking
Mm,
world at the driver level, right? That's not good. So again, I'm a big believer in saying, hey, it's not. I'm not here to replace humans. I've said before, I don't think AI is going to replace humans, but I do think humans that are leveraging AI and advanced
mm,
technologies are going to replace other humans that are not. And I think that's a message that really is resonating across the board now. So again, it could be the planning process, right? It could be strategic planning. It could be simulation planning. And that's great. And then you got to get into, well, let's validate that that's actually accurate in the real world and not in a theoretical laboratory. And I think that, that's where we're seeing a lot of the execution side really coming into form now. And it's not easy, right?
mm.
People ask me, who's your biggest competitor? I'm like, it's all that information in Spencer's head that has never been systematically uploaded. And so therefore you're invaluable because I don't know. And I think that's going to be a challenge when, technology is trying, and AI, et cetera, trying to, absorb that sheer amount of tribal knowledge that you've built over your, career. But the good news is there's the appetite. So we're getting, again, thankfully, the partners that we work with are very forward thinking. They're very open to these ideas. And again, that we have to get over some of the emotions that are naturally, surfaced when you talk about automation.
Yeah.
But again, I think automation's that's the final step for certain functions. But really, at this point, it's more of an not a man versus machine, but man and machine, harmonizing those two together for the best outcome. That one plus one equals three equation that we all strive to get to.
Chris, I'm reminded of this. You trying to like this. You mentioned this harmony um, of AI and humans, and I'm reminded of this. I was in this small group at my church one time, and my dad was having surgery, and this was like pretty early on with like these robotic
Yeah.
type things, and so this really sweet woman volunteered to pray for my dad as he was going into surgery, and she was very um, uh, confused and just challenged. She was trying to pray. She said, "Dear Lord, please help the robots." it,
The Da
uh,
Vinci surgical arm, like, yeah.
like so we all died laughing because it was just really it lightened up everything of the whole situation. But honestly,
Hey,
I think that's
prayer is
kind of
prayer. I'll take whatever I get, right? So
that's
especially in
kind
that
of where we're
scenario.
at right now in some
Yeah.
of this. You said we're not replacing humans, but it kind of sounds like you're augmenting humans
Yeah.
uh, in a little bit. But I want to lean in a little bit more. Like so, the question is why. I mean, these things make people uncomfortable. Why would they be doing this? What are the economics behind these types of um, adjustments and these adaptations to company cultures, making these types of shifts?
Yeah, I think at some point it becomes a cost of doing business. No different
Mm,
than we don't fax rate cons and a lot of, various documents now, right? That's just I don't think there's many players in the space today that are willing to accommodate that. So it's almost, you either have to get on board with it to some extent, or risk, being cut out of the game entirely because no one's going to work with legacy antiquated processes these days. That's just reality. But you're right. There's a lot of learning curve. There's massive amounts of hurdles in conveying the message. So I think when you're going into these engagements, it's important to know, where are you today? I think we talked about conference season, right? We'll see each other soon here, another one. And again, the expo floor is filled with technology vendors.
Yeah.
And I think it's just over my career, it's always interesting when the executives come back from these events and they're ready to tackle large language models or AI or blockchain. We've talked about this, and I think the onus falls on a lot of the team that's in the weeds, the operations
Yeah.
folks. Like, with all due respect, sir, ma'am, like, we are still on a pretty old architecture, and our foundation probably wouldn't be able to support the most bleeding edge tech right now. So that's be realistic in where you are, and know it's, again, I hate to be cliche with digital transformation, the journey, et cetera, but that there's a truth to that. The other thing is, I think people just look at technology as this magic bullet that's somehow going to solve everything. And one of the fatal mistakes they often see, having done these projects in the past, is, a lot of organizations just assume technology is going to, magically, like I said, fix everything. And I think Bill Gates once said, if adding automation to an inefficient process really just magnifies the inefficiency. And I
Yeah.
think that companies need to really first go, let's step back. What are our business problems? Let's be really honest. And let's not just have it, I go to these go live meetings for kickoffs, et cetera. And you often find, Spencer, it's the first time a lot of these massive enterprise organizations ever get in the same room together as various functions. And really, it's amazing how much they don't know internally about what the neighbor on the other side of the wall is doing. And I think that's a very enlightening experience to kind of have everyone in the group. And I think that should be more of a preliminary exercise before you go down the technological path to really, surgically and strategically define exactly the business problem. And then
Mm.
start to do your diligence on exploring technologies. And maybe AIs, maybe you're ready for it. And maybe it doesn't, people assume we have to jump into the GPTs, et cetera. And that's cool, right? But I think I'm a realist, right? We're in trucking and logistics, and there's been a lot of promises made. I still don't see L4 and L5 trucks predominantly cruising down the interstate, right? I'm a futurist. I think it will happen, but I'm also, again, a realist of the time it takes. So that can apply to any software, any technology. Just be realistic, and you don't have to solve the entire puzzle. I see a lot of companies trying to,
Yeah.
data is imperfect. It's never going to be perfect. Processes get broken. Things change. Markets change. So being agile enough to kind of adapt to anything that may come your way without being so tied into any one project, a rabbit hole, that you're unwilling to be flexible. So I think those are keys that I've seen over the course of the last few years, especially with AI.
So since you brought up the future, Chris, let's hang out there for a second. So I'm
Sure.
curious, as it becomes almost like, to your point, cost prohibitive to not embrace some of these, um, either, augmented or automated type functions. What do you expect is going to change as far as just the profile of what the internal office to office looks like for for a typical trucking company? Like, what are the profiles of the talent? Like, what's going to be complementary? How's that going to change? What do you see happening there?
Yeah, it's funny. I was looking at an article from Elon, the Elon. He was, he had this vision of, he's always said AI's, it's out of the bottle, the genie's out. So let's learn to get along with it, play nicely. Everyone has some people have dystopian outcomes, the Terminator 2 type scenario. But Elon, for this article, is talking about more of a protopian or utopian, where, and this is kind of more like meta, but was talking about a future where, humans are really just, we don't have to do much. Machines have taken over in due time, right? A great deal of just tasks. And that could be in a given function like trucking, a segment like that, or just generally speaking in life. So that's thought provoking, right? But when I go back to, modern day, present day, I would say that I think the future office is a lot of automation machines. If we go in a warehouse, right, I think if you're in an Amazon fulfillment center, I
Mm.
think there's probably a shelf life, because I think if there's definitely, we're seeing, and that's where you get, augmentation versus automation. I think there's certain tasks that will be fully automated. And I think even in the white collar, corporate offices, even trucking, right? I think there's going to be quite a bit of software that's automating a lot of tasks that, frankly, and as a former operator, I never felt was a good use of my time. I always in the back of my mind was saying, I wonder if one day we can, this will just be much more simplistic, and humans are just, there's bias, we're prone to making errors. That's fine. We are human. Not to say machines can't, but when you talk about certain tasks, repetitive tasks, back office tasks, things that involve a lot of numbers, why not? Why not just use that calculator I mentioned earlier? I also think, what does that mean for the humans that are still there, right? The skill set could become, there will be a technical skill set that will be required to really engage and interface with various technologies in more of an automated sense. So that'll be a skill set I think is being taught at the universities today.
Mhm.
But when you talk about even as a coder, as an engineer, developers, right? We may, Mark Cuban, I heard, we're going to enter the age of automation, where machines could go, hey, thanks, Spencer, for writing this source code. We'll take it from here and make it better. So even then, that you think STEM and stuff is all the rage, and that's where you want to push our kids, right? But at some point, and Mark Cuban was like, I want my kids to go into like philosophy, because at some point we have to kind of start to go, how do we govern AI? How do we play with it, right? And so that's an interesting take on that. So yeah, the future could be. I'm a firm believer, though, Spencer, that I never want to have complete control given to machines. I don't want Captain Kirk's chair sitting empty with a robot. I want Spencer, Chris, or whoever that knows this game, always kind of monitoring. And I think a lot of the way we approach it, Optym, is more of that, and you've heard it before. It's we're making recommendations based on output that AI may, this is what we suggest based on what's mathematically done.
Right.
Okay, is this feasible? And so I think you'll still see a lot of talented operators that are no longer having to do those tasks that bog down their day, right? And even now we say, hey, 80, 100% of your time is spent on those 20% or so of exceptions, right? So that means 80% of a lot of a person's day is feasibly able to be automated. That 20% of exceptions that still requires human intervention and reconciliation, I don't think that goes away for a while. And as I alluded to earlier, this is still a relationship business, right? So
Right.
again, I go back to if I'm a future operator and I can automate a lot of my day, I can intervene on those exceptions that I need, that machines, a truck runs off the road and hits a tree or whatever, right? Machines can't magically like, here's what you do. I need Spencer to go in, and your experience, you've been there, done that. Like, how you're going to fix that, right? You're going to have to be a part of that. But the other thing is, for the rest of your day, again, I said earlier, are you you have more time now to call out customers,
Mhm.
talk strategic, have conversations, get in good with them. The driver component I mentioned earlier, if I'm a dispatcher, I really want to make sure those drivers feel valued. And I think that's a challenge, because we're asking drivers to come into a space that we're constantly touting, automated and full AVs. It's like, well, what's the message there? I don't think that's going to be the case for a while, personally. I just
Yeah.
think even if the technology's there's too much legislative and regulatory hurdles. So again, let's do what humans are good at, which is human to human interaction and communication. Machines aren't good, right? I like the calculator, but when's the last time you logged on a website and the chatbot really got what you were
Yeah.
trying to say, right? It doesn't happen. It's a poor user experience. I'd much rather call and say, "Oh, it's Spencer. Great, I can talk to you." That's just human nature. So I think
Right.
again that future office is a mix of machines working on things that are mundane, repeatable, and the rest of the talent that we really value is going to be doing things that really impact the bottom line, grow the business, keep the retention of drivers and employees. Right? I think that's the future.
And I think you and I can both agree that along with these um, developments come a whole another level of new titles for people to create for themselves, just to reinvent nonsense that
Basically,
will that will ensure that they stay employed based on the title that they create for themselves. Is so that's exciting to me.
yeah.
That's great. So let's move away from there. I'm interested. I teased in terms of this M&A side. Like, you've been around the industry for a long time, so let's like big picture. Like, what do you see developing 2024 and beyond as far as M&A? Um, and then when you kind of address the bigger thing, we'll get into the direct freight
Mhm.
tech
Sure.
implications.
Yeah, I think this will be. I mean, markets obviously, as you know all too well, right? Markets tend to have a bit of an influence on how these things go. Um, the capital markets aren't really what they were in the frenzy days, so I think we're back down to earth, right? These massive checks that are being written with minimal diligence. The multiples were a little outrageous, right? I think we could all agree that a company that raises 50, 100 million and still hasn't really defined product market fit, that's risk. But we all got caught up in it. I did as well, right? But I think 2024 is going to be a year of a lot of consolidation. I think we're already seeing it now, right? Where, asset-based organizations are starting to realize, the smaller players are having a hard time staying afloat despite making record profits during the COVID era. And you're seeing that now. Why is this market, we haven't had this recalibration that's typical in the cycles, because apparently quite a few companies actually, didn't all go out and buy brand new trailers and tractors. They kind of said, let's save this for a rainy day. And I think that's why you haven't seen the amount of carriers dropping out of the market at the pace we're used to seeing. So I think that still is, it really sets up a lot of scenarios for companies that are looking to increase their fleet size, maybe find complementary partners in the ecosystem that, are really ready to sell. And if the numbers are right, that can lead into things. And from a broader perspective, it goes back to kind of what I was saying, when I talked to the private equity community, the PEs guys, they're trying to build out portfolios of these, effectively, what are you trying to build? It's like they want to build these massive 3PL, 4PLs that have best of breed in every niche solution within that portfolio. So, who knows what the future holds? You're a better guy to answer that question than me, probably. But I definitely see, in due time, you may have just a much smaller number of true powerhouses that offer every solution imaginable. And that's pretty cool to think about. But what does that mean for everyone else, right? That's kind of where I don't have that answer. But I think that's going to be a trend throughout the rest of this year. And of course, we don't have the crystal ball to know when that market flips. So that will obviously, when we start to see that big uptick, I think that could change the trajectory of what M&A means for whether it's this calendar year or into next year. So TBD.
TBD. So as the industry continues to consolidate, you had mentioned that there's been so many new technological innovations and companies enter the space, even in the last 5 years. And so my question to you is like, what might we see develop on the M&A specific to FreightTech as carriers continue to consolidate in mass? Like, what will that mean when there's a much smaller amount of companies actually to serve and to provide this tech service to? What consolidation or M&A developments might we see specific to FreightTech in response to that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'll kind of change the way I answer that. Is, as a tech company, you want to be Switzerland and agnostic and make sure you can, scale as fast, as much as you can. And it'll be interesting to see if there's companies now, we've seen it in the past, right, where they have such a provocative or some kind of solution that, companies that they're really penetrated the market, hit that critical mass, there's certainly been numbers on napkins written for acquisition discussions, right? But again, I think each technology vendor will have to ask that you'll have to answer that strategic question. Are we ready to exit? There's a lot of variables that go into that. Or do we see more of we're unwilling to really go into, to be acquired because we feel like that will limit our ability to really penetrate the market to the extent we feel is possible. So I think that's going to be a debate that each tech vendor has based on where they feel they're, how much upside, how much white space do they still have left to conquer. But at the end of the day, right, if the numbers are right, most of the time I know founders are willing to take that check and call it a day. What does it mean for the rest of the players? That's a great question, right? I think that's an existential type question. If you have, 20, 30 mega players that service everything on the asset, the brokerage, warehousing, even extending beyond into the global reach on the forwarding side, air freight, right? I think you could be building massive powerhouses. And we see some of those today that are just missing certain areas. But what does that do, Spencer, to the competitive landscape and the ecosystem, right? It's one thing if I'm friendly with everybody, but if I start to encroach by getting acquired, there's optics there that say, oh, we used to work with you guys, but you're acquired by our competitor. Now there's a problem. So that's going to be an interesting dynamic, right? Because there's not been so many players that I believe in multiple winners in any space. But I think once you start to form alliances, there are lines in the sand that get drawn. And that's another strategic decision that each vendor has to make. Are we willing to kind of cut ourselves short? It's risk reward? Is it the payout better if we align with, one or two major companies and willing to forego the others that, again, view us now as a threat versus, a complementary solution for them? So, excuse me, I think I don't have that crystal ball, but I do conceptually, I think those are questions I think will be discussed at conferences and in boardrooms across the industry.
Rumors go crazy.
Lots of
at
rumors.
Conferences. That's right. Right. Well, listen. Let me wrap up with a little wild card question for you.
Love it.
I'm
Yeah.
curious. I'm curious. You've been a long time in this tech space, but let's go back senior college or whatever it is,
Oh,
and you're like, you can go into any professional space except transportation, logistics, tech. Where might he have chosen to gone if you not arrived
wow.
in this
What a
arena?
hypothetical. I mean, I'm just not that bright, to be honest with you. Like, I don't think I had a lot of, I was in the military, right? Most people don't go into active duty if they had, so many other opportunities, right? So that's reality. But what would I have done? And, I'm a social guy. So honestly, I think maybe I'd have gone out to Hollywood and say, hey, whether I can play a guitar well or get an audition to act or something or stand up comedy, who knows, right? But I always I'm a people person, right? I know that's cliche again, but I can't envision ever doing anything that requires me to sit in a cubicle and code or God bless those people that are great. I need them.
Takes
um,
all kinds, baby.
it takes all kinds. It takes a village, and I'm just more of like I'd rather maybe I would have been in a band, Spencer. I don't know. I think that I can't imagine anything more fun than going out and having my wife's watching the Taylor Swift Eras tour right now, and I'm just that's got to be such a just the amount of adrenaline to go on a stage, whether you're acting or in a movie or anything, right? And see thousands of tens of thousands of people just engaging in every word you say and every note you play, right? That would have been cool. But hey, I'm not unique in having the rock star or the A-list actor dream, right? So, but yeah, that's my simple answer.
Well, and it's a good one. And I appreciate you, sir. We're going to look for you in 2025. You're going to headline TCA in terms of the entertainment. That's my prediction for
Oh no, you
2025.
signed
And
me up,
so,
right? Yeah, great, great.
so hey,
Well,
listen,
I'll,
Chris.
I'll see you this next one, and we'll have to have maybe a private audition back in a closet somewhere. Make sure I don't make a fool out of myself. So.
Done and done. Hey, appreciate all the insights
Yeah.
and kind of being out front of the rest of us and letting us know what's coming. That's going to do it for us in the hot seat, Chris. We'll see you next time.